Welcome back to the Reentry Room podcast. This is the space all about working motherhood where we get really honest, and sometimes that means talking about the brutal truths about motherhood, being a working mom, birth, and everything in between. I'm Alexa Starks, your host. I am the founder of Executive Moms. I'm a maternity leave coach. And today I'm so excited because we have with us Diane Moca, and she is the founder of MomSub. So I'm so excited to have you here. Welcome, Diane.
Thank you, Alexa. It's great to be here.
Yeah, and this is really amazing because I was on your podcast and it was so fabulous and so fun. So what's your podcast name? Let's start with that.
Women and Work. It's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, under my Working Mom Warrior YouTube channel and all the other places.
Love it. Okay, so if anyone hasn't yet listened to that, go take a listen. It was fabulous and phenomenal. And then, Diane, please give us a little introduction about what you do, how fabulous you are, where you are in your motherhood journey, and we'll go from there.
Well, I'm flawed like everyone else. So I am the founder of MomSub, like a substitute mom. And we quickly find a family's one ideal nanny match that fits their location, schedule, and budget, and then help them easily manage their weekly childcare payments, schedule changes, and backup care, which are a lot of the things that cause so much stress and time. In fact, we eliminate 30 hours on average for finding the right care, and then many hours every week to help coordinate things when, the emergencies arise and things don't always go as planned.
I love that. And then is it nationwide or is it specific to a couple cities?
We started in Chicago and we have now spread across the country. So we are all over Phoenix, Connecticut, you name it, we can help parents there in the United States.
Oh, I love it. And what about multiple kids?
Multiple kids?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we help lots of families that have more than one child. We have not yet ventured into the nanny share arena, but that is one of our future visions, is to help families that want to get one nanny and then share the nanny to help with costs and things like that.
That's so interesting. I love this. And this is, I think, really, before I got pregnant, I never even thought about nannies. I was just like, daycare, it's what you're supposed to do. And then, because I worked remotely, I was like, I think I'm going to keep my kids home as long as possible till maybe they're one. Then my son started getting more active and needed more engagement and entertainment. And the daycare was like, oh, we don't have availability for 6 months out anyways. So I was like scrambling all of a sudden to find a nanny to help cover at least part of the day, half the day, so I could get real work done. And it was a lot of work interviewing nannies. And I remember one of the nannies we found was like okay and she could start right away, and so I went with her, but it just didn't work out and she kind of like bailed a couple of the days, and then I was left with like just being like having to drop meetings so that I could play with my son because he was home. But it was hard. So I love what you're doing. I think it's so needed, especially with the cost of daycare and more moms wanting to have their kids home for longer.
And even though if you look at the hourly with full time, you would say, oh, well, a nanny is more. But there's a lot of ways that a nanny can be less. One of our moms saved $10,000 this year because she didn't need her kids there full time, but they were going to charge her full time. And when you think about all the days when your kid is not there because they're sick or on vacation or whatever, and you're still paying that same fee. So with our service, you pay for the care you get, and you can adjust that, from week to week. And we help with those adjustments. So like you said, when somebody doesn't work out, we're in their village for the long haul. So we're already working on a backup if you're kind of getting the vibe that maybe this person isn't my long-term fit, And so we want to be there to help to eliminate the stress and delegate. We do the interviews, we do the background checks, we do the searching, so you can spend more time with your kids, right?
Yeah, that's so amazing. I love that. And what got you wanting to start MomSub? I love moms' origin stories of how
Yeah.
they got to
So
their new job.
my degree was in journalism. I mean, this was my passion, and it's still part of my DNA. So I
Mhm.
spent 15 years as a television reporter at a
Wow.
CBS station, reporting on news, on the 10 o'clock news. And when my first child came along, talk about reentry, my plan initially was, well, I'll just take 5 years off, while he's home and I'm home. And then
Mhm.
and when he goes to school, I'll go back to work. Completely naive. I would never have been able to get back into my field. And I just happened after 6 months because I was freelance and I kind of, just gave them a notice that, hey, take me off the schedule. But after 6 months, I went back to visit and to see my old colleagues and to bring the baby so they could
Mhm.
all ooh and ah over him. And I was talking to my managing editor, and he said, we would love to have you back. And I said, oh my gosh, I really miss this. I do wish that I could continue my career, but I'm really enjoying this time, and I want to be more of a hands-on mom than I would be if I was, back full time. And I said, I would
Mhm.
only want to work 1 or 2 days a week. Ha ha ha. I said it as a joke. And he said, oh, I think we could arrange that. Now,
That's
why did
amazing.
I think this was a joke? And he did arrange it. And that was my schedule for the next 15 years. It changed my life. I always tell moms, ask for what you want,
Mhm.
right? I'm sure you tell them the
That's
same thing.
exactly what I talk about is
Yes,
advocacy. It's never going to
yes.
happen if you don't ask.
And come up with a plan. Tell them
Mhm.
why the ROI is good for them as well as
Yep.
you. So this was the great option for me. Everything about it I loved except the commute. Then I started listening to audiobooks, and then I started loving the commute. It actually got me involved in starting a side business, which is how I became an entrepreneur. I have two previous businesses to
Mhm.
MomSub. But the thing that wasn't working was childcare. I needed someone 2 days a week. My days changed every week, sometimes even the hours. And so I would find someone that could accommodate that, and then they would leave. And so 12 different childcare providers in the first 4 years of being a working mom. I love my career, but I was almost thinking of switching because this was crazy and causing me a lot of stress. And then I found Miss Dawn, our forever nanny, who stayed with us for 8 years. And she was a mile away, right in my own community. Why didn't I know about her? There's technology for that. And that's when I realized technology can bring together all of the people in the community that might be able to help you, and the puzzle that is your life and the puzzle that is their life, and with algorithms and AI and automation figure out who's the best missing puzzle piece to fit into your life. And that's what we're doing now.
Oh, I love that story. I love it for so many reasons. The being able to design your flexible return to work experience and it works for you and is exactly what you want so you can do what you love. And I love hearing other mom stories about finding their passion for, you know, their entrepreneur journey, and that's so meaningful. I love that. And it's so inspiring. I feel like there's so many other moms who struggle going back to work, and I know that's what I work on, but it's important to hear other people have successful habits, have like be successful doing exactly that, you know. So I love that. And then
Yes.
okay,
It
so
works.
I
That
want
part-time was perfect for me. It's why a lot of women go into business, right? To have that flexibility to control your time. And it's not for everyone, but I wanted to be the Girl Scout leader, the room mom, the soccer coach. And I did all those things. I wanted to be there to help with homework, and pick up after school. And I did all those things 5 days a week. And 2 days a week when I was gone, I was gone. I was 100 miles away in another city. So I was not the default parent for those 2 days. And I could just focus on, being a reporter, and then 5 days focus on being a mom. Yeah.
oh, that's so amazing. I love that. That's honestly that's a dream for many
It
women.
was. I had a lot of moms say I'm envious of that. And then there were things that got complicated. It wasn't enough income. That's why I started the side hustle. The side hustle made me kind of crazy. Got my business in real estate before the crash, and then after the crash, it was like, this is not helping our family with finances. It's making things worse. And then I went through a lot of stress. But throughout that, I had one consistent focus, and that was, being there for the kids almost to a fault, whenever they needed anything, especially if it was school related or achievement related. And I know I shared a little bit of that with you. We were very much a family that was focused on education and achievement and doing things in life that were, productive. And, this to me seemed like, that was a reflection of me and my values, and my kids embraced it, and it seemed like, the right direction. And so many other parents, of course, are focused on that as well. And then I heard about, the book and the concept of the tiger mom, and I was like, oh, that's me.
I haven't even heard of the tiger mom. I actually think I saw something about that
Yes.
this past week, and I was like, I don't know what that is. And then it blipped right off the radar.
Yeah, The Tiger Mom was a book written by a woman who was extremely focused on achievement, and almost to the point, of pushing her kids, like, you're going to play tennis, you're going to be the champion, you're going to be in the science club, you're going to have the best project and get number one. And while we were really proud of them when they got number one, we were also like, you're going to join the swim team and you don't even like the water and you're terrible at swimming. Good for you for getting out of your comfort zone and finishing last and not running out of the pool and crying and saying, I'm never going to do this again. And realizing I could be on the swim team, even though I'm terrible at it, because I just think it would be kind of cool to be, swimming and be at these meets. And I don't care if I come in last. I'll try to improve my own time. And so we weren't so achievement oriented that the only thing that mattered was being number one. I was there just as involved in being at the swim meet as I was at the chess tournaments, where they did get the top trophies.
I love it. Okay, I really want to get into your what we're going to talk about. So normally we have our guest episodes be either a what she learned, your biggest lesson, or a confession moment. And today, I believe we're doing a confession. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. So I want to hear all of this, because this is going to be really beneficial for just the whole motherhood and parenting phase, not just the new postpartum era, but parenting as a whole. So what do you got for us?
So I, like I said, was focused on this achievement culture, and it seemed to me that my kids, my son, who is now 25, and my daughter, who is now 22, fully embraced that. They were the ones, when they found out I was teaching chess, saying, can you teach us too? Can we learn? And then when they found out there were tournaments, can we go? Can we compete? They were competitive. And they seemed to embrace, just the same as my husband and I, this idea of performance and doing well. And they were different. And of course, one's a boy, one's a girl, one's a little more gregarious and outgoing, the other one's a little more reserved. But in general, they had friends, they seemed very well adjusted. My husband and I both spent a lot of time with them. We really structured our professional life to be there hands-on with them in a way that a lot of parents don't or can't. And I never questioned, is there anything about this culture I'm creating in my family that is affecting my kids differently? And then when my daughter was an early teen, she was struggling with some of the things I struggle with, perfectionism, a thing that a lot of girls and women struggle with. We were and taking her to therapists because she was, procrastinating to the point where it was upsetting her, staying up too late, trying to get all her projects done perfectly. If she didn't get an A+, she would get upset. We want you to get good grades, we reward that, but we're not going to punish you if you get a B. We're not going to say we're so disappointed in you. Do your best, but your best should not include everything has to be perfect. So we were trying to recognize that she was struggling with this a little, but I did not understand the struggle. And so I'll skip ahead and say she had a lot of mental health issues, and I had not dealt with that in my family, in myself. I struggled as a teen, like a lot of kids do, and a lot of adults can look back and go, wow, man, those years were hard in high school. I was bullied, or, I didn't fit in, I, tried drugs to be able to find a peer group, all those things. And so I recognize that this is just sort of part of growing up. I don't think I recognize the bigger picture. She was going to a therapist at the time, and I think I found out literally like 3 years later that the therapist had diagnosed her with depression and anxiety and not told me. And I hadn't pushed for that. And I think some of it was sort of not wanting to hear there was anything wrong, with my daughter. And there's not anything wrong with her. We all have different flaws or different idiosyncrasies. I'm not even going to call it a flaw, because mental illness may help her see the world in a different way that is wonderful to her. And maybe she would say, no, Mom, it's not. But, she's written 40 songs to express herself, probably more than that at this point, 50, 60. And some are just beautiful and haunting and touching. And, and that creative output was a result, I think, of a lot of her struggles. But the confession is, I wrote an essay in a magazine called Your Teen for Parents. And I said, my daughter has anxiety. Is it my fault? I just went and looked at it today. It's from 2019. And I talked about these things she was struggling with. By then, she was, 2019, she was about 15. So she was kind of still struggling even with some of her schoolwork and kind of getting in this place where she couldn't get out of bed some days. And I wrote about, she's having these issues. I'm feeling this mom guilt, but, is it my fault? I don't know. And that's not really the point, and I'll never know. And there's no reason to blame myself. And I talked about all the things, about moms not wanting to feel guilty and accepting you did your best. And I didn't really admit that there were mistakes that I made that I should have owned them and said to others. And I did in the article talk about like, hey, I did this. We focused on achievement. Her therapist says she values herself only based on her performance and achievement, not intrinsically as a person that she has value. Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I'm sorry if that happened. And maybe some things I did led to that, but now I know and everything will get better. It didn't get better. So in 2021, she made an attempt on her life. And it was very serious. It wasn't just a cry for help. She fully intended, not to wake up. And then everything changed. And so I was in her hospital room because we did find her. Oh my God, 8 hours of terror, not knowing where she was. And all the crazy things I thought of instead of mental health. Oh my gosh, she met some guy online, she's being trafficked, she's being sent to Guatemala. I mean, all these crazy things I thought instead of she has mental illness. Maybe she maybe she left to go attempt something horrible until we finally, got a hold of her friends. And then they told us, oh, she's been carrying around these 120 pills in her purse. But we didn't think she would really take them, So, at her bedside, I said, that conversation we had yesterday that I had with her about you dropping out of school because you hated it because it was in the middle of COVID and you couldn't go to class and you were stuck in your room and it was just awful and you never wanted to see Zoom class again and you just didn't want to have anything to do with school. It was too much pressure. And I'm like, but school's so easy. You can do it with your eyes closed, and you would lose the scholarship with $250,000 in our, and this is so important, our family that struggle with money. And now here you got this wonderful thing and, a full ride and just they'll let you work from home. And, and I said, school doesn't matter. I don't care. She's like, oh, you don't care about me? No, it's not that I don't care about you. I don't care anymore about what you do other than being happy, other than finding what brings you peace, what brings you joy, what brings you happiness, what makes you want to stay on this earth and in this world. And that's maybe completely different than anything I ever thought would make you happy. And so I always thought, because she loved, she skipped a grade, which I advocated for in the school. I'm like, she's reading fourth grade chapter books in kindergarten. What in the heck is she going to do in first grade other than be completely bored? And she would, she loved talking about the fact that she skipped a grade. She loved telling other kids that she won first place chess trophies. She embraced this idea of being smart, but she was afraid to never not be that, and that other people not judged her, but liked her because of that, and she liked herself because of that. But if there was something that she didn't have that, if there was somehow any questioning of that, oh my gosh, if I don't get an A in this class, am I still smart? Am I still the smartest kid? Am I still a worthwhile human? Then that's not the kind of achievement you want someone to go after, the kind that completely defines who they are, and without it they're nothing, they're worthless. And so I wrote in this article that I don't know if I'm to blame, and it doesn't matter. And so my admission today is that it does matter. That I can't go back in time, but that article was written in 2019 and her attempt was in 2021, and I sat at her bedside and said, nothing that you ever do is going to affect how much I love you and how much I want you to find happiness and how much I think you are valuable and a person in this world who is going to, be in the world the way you want to be in the world and contribute or not contribute the way you want to. And, if that means just being in bed every day, which is what she was spending a lot of time doing because she was in deep depression, and the fact that I just didn't recognize it, I said, then that's what you can do. And that's kind of what she did for the next year. And then eventually on her own, and she didn't want any more therapy or medication or anything else. She, I guess you could say, pulled herself out of it. She still tells me now, just because you see on the outside, I'm functioning, I'm working, I have a boyfriend, I'm smiling, I'm doing things with friends. It doesn't mean that I don't still feel depressed or have this sort of dark cloud, which is hard for me to understand, because I don't have mental illness, but I accept, and I recognize that, yes, there's definitely some things I did that contributed to that. I will take the blame. I will take, I'm not saying like, oh, I'm going to feel this mom guilt forever and put my head under a pillow and, and never come out again. But I can tell others that to just say, like I did in this article, am I to blame? I don't know. I'll never know. It doesn't matter. It does matter. It does matter. It does matter that my son, who was in the same achievement culture family, didn't have the issues. I mean, of course, every kid has issues. Every person has issues, but didn't have those issues, didn't have mental health issues. So my daughter, perhaps in her genes, had a predisposition to this. Mm-hmm. And perhaps if our family was more chill, that predisposition wouldn't have presented in the way that it did. And so I think the biggest confession that I'm making about what I did wrong was not recognizing this difference between my two children, not recognizing this difference between my daughter and her personality type and her predisposition and me, because I don't have that. I'm an achievement-oriented person. I get great, satisfaction and joy out of achieving things, but I still don't tie my worth into it. When I fail miserably, I don't crawl in a hole. Yeah, I mean, I have down periods, but I have a different way of dealing with it. And so not recognizing that in my daughter, she'll say things now. She'll say, didn't you know, because like all the clothes used to bother me and you had to buy special things and you had to cut off all my tags. Didn't you know that made me different? Maybe I'm on the spectrum or something. And I was like, I don't know, I cut your tags, You seemed so happy and adjusted and successful. I was evaluating her through this lens of success. She was successful in all the ways that parents typically want their kids to be successful. Great grades in school, participating in activities, friend group, And so when the depression hit and all these things started changing, I was like, well, this is puberty, this is adolescence. I struggled too. My way wasn't the best way. I found friends who drank alcohol and did drugs. That was not the best way, but I kind of got through that period and came out fine on the other side. But she didn't kind of come out fine on the other side. And so that's my confession, that I need to accept the responsibility that I did things wrong. Doesn't mean I'm a bad person, but by sharing that, others can recognize, that if you're an A-type personality and, your family is in that, achievement culture, and one of the kids seems, or any of the children in your family seem like this, they have that same DNA, look for signs. I didn't recognize some of the signs, when she was procrastinating, and when she was, just, staying up too late, being too much of a perfectionist. I didn't recognize that this was a sign of something bigger and more dangerous and dark lurking. And it changed the trajectory of our life, her life. She just moved out this past summer with her boyfriend. And I, worry about her, I think, in a different way than I worry about my other child who doesn't have mental illness. And I wish that, I could go back and recognize some of these signs that I guess I didn't want to see. So that's my flaw as a mother and my confession.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. First of all, this is so deep, and I feel like there's a few times where I was like getting really teary-eyed, because I was very similar to you, as I had went through depression in high school, but I self-medicated with drugs and alcohol, found some bad friend groups, and eventually pulled myself out of it. I did go to therapy and did get on Prozac, but eventually went off and found my way out. But my little brother actually didn't find his way out, and he took his own life in 2015. He was 19. And so my parents and I went through a very similar thing you talked about like, what did I do wrong? Where did I go wrong? What could I have done better? What could I have done differently? And hindsight is always 2020. And you look back and you're like, there were signs, and we did try to reach out and help, but he never admitted he needed help and never went and got help. And so it's very difficult to pull someone out of that phase of the dark cloud all the time. And I think as a mom guilt will eat you alive if you let it. There's 1,000, a million coulda, woulda, shouldas of done things differently. And I talk with my husband about this because we're very much like, sometimes we'll overanalyze the moment of like trying to teach our kids a lesson. So my son is 3, my daughter's 1.5, and we'll try to like, if we teach him this, he'll, we want him to turn into this type of person when he grows up. And so we got to teach this and build more discipline because XYZ. And I'm like, just let it be sometimes. Like sometimes you just have to let them go through this, and I try to have balance between a more hands-off approach versus more discipline, and try to balance that. But I feel like you can always analyze every situation for things you could do differently. And so when you look back, yes, there's like I didn't do things perfectly, but are we ever going to do things perfectly? Like, how do we, in the moment, accept that we may not do things perfectly, but we're still trying our best?
But when the stakes are higher, not perfectly, but I think that, I'm making this confession about accepting blame because the stakes are so high. And so my kids went through high school right when the dawn of kind of social media getting popular among young people. They knew they were a step ahead of us trying to, keep them from it. Now they have these ads, Instagram teen. I'm like, they didn't have it when my teen was going through it, and so, there's two thoughts that I want to share, and I'm sorry, so sorry about your brother.
Thank you.
my gosh, I did not know that. And I'm just so grateful every day that my daughter's attempt resulted in her being in the hospital and not somewhere else. And so I do think, and I'm not an expert, I'm not a therapist, I didn't study psychology, but I do think that there is this idea that people have a predisposition to something, and it may present and it may not. And there's things that can be done to try to minimize the likelihood that it presents. And so I think if someone had given me a manual, if I had understood, and I knew that my husband's mother died when he was 12. She had what was undiagnosed at the time, a long time ago, mental health issues, according to his relatives when I asked about her. And she died through an accident that was, driving alcohol related, but connected to like her self-soothing mental health. And so, to me, that was always the boogeyman. Like, we'll keep them from, alcohol and drugs. And, so I think this idea of course, no, I don't want moms to feel guilt. And I don't want you to overanalyze everything. But sometimes moms like us who are very confident and successful in the workplace, and me not having any mental illness in this way in my background, it really didn't become such a common thing to talk about in the vernacular until the last, 10, 15 years. So there's still plenty of moms that sort of grew up without understanding this. And there's lots of families that just didn't have this in their family or still don't talk about it. So I'm not saying every kid out there has a predisposition to it. My son grew up in the same culture and doesn't have any, issues like this. And, so understanding and recognizing maybe I'm not seeing the big picture, right? We don't see the forest when we're in the trees. Yep. When you're with a 1-year-old in the grocery store and they're having a tantrum, you definitely don't see the forest. And when your teenager is staying out all night, so this is the number 2 thing I wanted to mention, is my strong personality trait to want to control everything. So I did get her help, and I did consult all the experts, and I started reading a million blogs and articles and listening to podcasts and books, and and they all said, get her help, take her to programs. She went to overnight programs. She multiple times, 4 or 5 times, she was in the hospital for multiple days when she was at risk of harming herself, and she was on all kinds of different medications and went to programs after school, basically kind of was out of school for like a year, mostly just in bed, had so many credits, she graduated no problem with still high honors, but it just not, I was doing all the things that I do as a reporter and a journalist and a researcher and a type A personality. Here's the problem, here's the solution, this is what the experts say, get her in programs, and none of it was working. And I never just took a step back, because that's not really my way, and had deep thought and talk to, talk to others who, were going through it. I did go through some of these programs through NAMI, National Association for Mental Illness. But I just know now, looking back, that and her just saying, well, did you ever think about this? Did you ever think about, how I was different than Austin because of that, or how, I reacted when you did this, or I didn't put it in the right context. I didn't look from enough different angles. Many, many years ago, when I was trying to break into media, I had a radio show called The Polygon. And the idea was a debate really isn't about this side or that side, right? We're so polarized nowadays in this country. There's all these different sides. And so many of us often don't go and look at the other side. We look at this, and then we look at that. And I was just, there was a horrible day when, I was doing this to protect her. I thought she was in danger of harming herself, and maybe she was, and maybe this was the best thing to do. But I tricked her into staying here, and then the cops were coming, and they literally physically restrained her. I don't remember if it was a straitjacket. She was restrained in an ambulance, and that traumatized her probably more than the mental illness, And that was me. Just everything I was doing wasn't working, wasn't solving the problem. So I was doing the same thing, just more intensely. So this time I'm going to call the police. This time we're going to get her committed, instead of saying, this isn't working, And I don't care about the experts. I care about my family. What can I do instead? Could I literally just give her a hug and say, I love you no matter what. Just spend all day in bed every day. And it's okay.
So is the solution to not try to fix it as much? Because from my point of view, if I try to put myself in your shoes, you were doing everything I would do, right? I researched the hell out of pregnancy, birth, baby. I still research everything now that my son's dropping a nap and it's a shit show. So if I were in your shoes, I would do the same thing of doing all this research until I was blue in the face and up all night. And I probably would also call the cops and be like, my job is to keep you alive by any means necessary at the end of the day. And so I would probably do the same thing. But it sounds like maybe the solution is to not try to control it as much.
Everyone's different, but I think I was throwing gas on the fire. I think I was causing her trauma that was increasing, the whatever the mental gymnastics were going on in her head. And so every person's, I can't say what's right for one person, one family, one mom, one child, but I can say that I don't think I not looked hard enough. I don't think I took a step back and thought about other options. I don't think I just even realized there were other options. And so could I have just said, is there an option to do nothing? Oh my gosh, what if I do nothing and she harms herself? Then it's my fault. But if I do everything, so it was almost maybe to alleviate my guilt a little. If I do everything I possibly could, I of course I don't want anything I do to lead to her harming herself. Mm-hmm. But if she did, then I did everything I could. But I didn't do everything I could because I thought I was doing everything I could, because I was doing it in the context of this is how me, Diane Moca, does everything she can. I research and I listen to the experts and I follow the guidelines. But I never once, until sitting at her bedside, said, doesn't, I love you no matter what. And from now on, it doesn't matter if you just stay in bed all day, every day. You wake up for a couple hours, you have something to eat, you binge TV for a couple hours, and then you go back to sleep. And she literally, did that for months, 6, 8, 9 months, And then she one day said, I think I'm going to go get a job at Hooters. And I was like, oh, okay. That sounds great. That sounds like kind of fun. I was a cocktail waitress in college. It helped me pay for college. So instead of, the old me would have been like, you're finally feeling better. Well, maybe you can take a class at night too. Mm-hmm. And other people will say, she'll probably go back to school eventually. She's so smart, Yes, she's so smart. And that's going to serve her well in her life. And she has said she doesn't want anything to do with school. And I'm not going to ask her about it because she doesn't want anything to do with school. If she changes her mind someday, great. I'm not holding out that hope. Someday she's going to graduate, because it doesn't matter. What matters is if she's happy. I hope she's happy. On the outside, she seems happier. She seems more well adjusted. And so would she have come to that place if instead of me calling the cops and putting her in these programs, I had listened to her, who said the therapy's not working, the pills aren't working, nothing's working. All I want to do is be in bed. Well, that's depression. You can't just stay in that, So I didn't listen to her. I didn't, because, so that's what I needed to. That's what parents need to do is listen and at least try it. Maybe if after 2 years, she's starting to get bed sores, she's in bed so much, and and you say, wait, let's try something else. But I didn't try that extreme Maybe I did for a few days at a time or even a couple weeks at a time. But I mean, I literally just every day, you want me to help you you want me to make you a sandwich? Okay. You know, you want me to bring it in your room? Okay. No judgment. No, oh my gosh, this wasted potential. Who says what potential? Who says what we should do in life, and who we should be, We should be in the place that, makes us happy. Like, I know what makes me happy. Achieving things makes me happy, but that doesn't mean it makes her happy. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. This has been like so deep and very unexpectedly deep. So this is going to be really good. But where I want to bring it home for our listeners, some of whom are probably newer moms and aren't yet going through the teenage.
Yeah. Don't get scared,
drama.
please. Enjoy the stage you're in and focus on that. And maybe a little bit of lesson is because those stages are hard too, they're not life or death, they are if you leave them alone and they're a toddler by a pool. They are if you don't strap your child in a car seat, but they're not life or death if you're if you're doing something wrong. But the consequences do get more serious as you get older. And not that you should feel guilt, but you gotta look at things other ways. And it doesn't even always include asking everyone and asking the experts and asking all your friends. Sometimes it just includes listening to your child and hearing something you don't want to hear.
I love that. Thank you so much. Let's go back to MomSub for a moment, because that is very pertinent to
My passion.
Yes, to your passion and to what many moms are looking for. Where can we find MomSub? It's an app in the App Store, or is it a website?
All of the above. So MomSub stands for substitute mom. So you can go to MomSub, MomSub.com, and you can put in a request for us to find you the childcare that matches your location, schedule, budget, and all your criteria, and then manage that care week to week. You can go in the App Store and download the app and put in all your criteria, and then watch a video interview with a person who is your match. You can go into Google Play and do the same thing on an Android, and you can contact me. I want to hear from moms. You can reach me at Diane at MomSub.com, Diane at MomSub.com, and we'd love for you to listen to our Women in Work podcast. And I have a ton of videos on my YouTube channel called Working Mom Warrior. It's what I did after the 15 years of being a television reporter. I started a YouTube channel interviewing moms about their challenges, and I created a whole series of about 6 or 8 videos called My Working Mom Journey, when I share all these different times in my life, like the time when I negotiated 2 days a week. I did this before my daughter faced her struggles and our family faced those struggles. But it covers a lot of ground, and I welcome you to get the resources and do what you need to do to feel like you have the information, but then at a certain point stop with the information and get the signals that you're getting from the people right in your world, in your family.
Love it. And I will link to all your links in the description as well below, so you can find those below. And I will link to the Reentry Blueprint System for Moms. So if you are pregnant and planning your maternity leave and your return to work, you can grab my toolkit as well. Diane, thank you so much for joining us on the Reentry Room. This has been an absolute deep, raw, vulnerable, amazing episode. So thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you, Alexa.
And we will see everyone in the next episode. Thank you.